Hello folks and welcome back. In this presentation we'll be going through chapter 3 from my book, which is going to cover my crown chakra activation, awakening event, the great sign in heaven, the Jehovian trumpets, symbolism, mushrooms, Aleister Crowley Jr. and Azazel. Now, off the back of me leaving university with my economics degree, I later got a job at a trading firm in Watford to learn how to trade the financial markets, in particular the Forex and stock markets, where I went through a course. And off the back of that course, you're given money on a demo account if you prove that you can stick to the strategy. They then invest live money with you, and you obviously get a commission from the profits you make each week in the markets whilst following their strategy and risk management. That course, at the end of that course, is about a week. It had a 2-day mindset training course. Off the back of that, that was the trigger for me to have this crown chakra activation that happened a few weeks after that event. So within that course, because individuals who trade the financial markets, again, as we covered with money and what money stands for, is otherwise, tied to our creative capacity, our sweat equity that controls the manifestation flows down here through the banks and this currency system that's set up, right? That it does come with a lot of charge. That's why individuals, you hear of these tragic stories of investment bankers, traders who lose large amounts of money due to whatever happens, market shocks or, ill risk management on their part, following strategies, letting their emotional body get in the way, chuck themselves off buildings because they've basically, blown up their account or lost large sums. That it's obvious that even though monies are just kind of, digits on a computer, pieces of paper, it is charged because we believe in it. It's backed by a full faith and credit that it's enough for individuals to kill themselves if they lose large amounts of it. Okay, so it just goes to prove how powerful money actually is when, dissecting just the mere act of someone who loses just mere digits on account, right, on a bank. As we know, it's all made up, ends up throwing themselves off a building. Okay, so that's why in trading, psychology is key. And in order to become a success in the financial markets, there's many books of many successful traders that dedicate a large chunk of their book on the psychology of trading in order to limit the kind of self-sabotage that might go on with surrounding, what happens in our subconscious minds in regards to our preconditioned beliefs towards money, abundance, prosperity, and also being able to, just follow a strategy and stay disciplined. Okay, and stop the likes of like revenge trading, thinking the markets owe us money whenever we make a loss, and just trying to rein in that goat brain, that emotional body part of ourselves, so we can just be more robotic and stick to the strategy and let the percentages work in our favor. Right, when we win more than we lose, you're always going to lose. It's just a matter of cutting your losses and then obviously, letting your winners ride out. And so that 2 days was very eye-opening to me because it revealed the power of my subconscious mind, our subconscious minds, and it started to reveal to me the kind of neuroplasticity of our minds as well, and how we can actually reprogram our minds and how it can affect the world around us as co-creators and manifestors down here, which opened the door for me to start researching quantum physics, the non-locality of our consciousness, biocentrism. There was a book by Robert Lanza that I read that's kind of like, advocating this concept of a mind before matter universe, the law of attraction, and then all these motivational speakers like Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, right? That was really tuned into in order to try and, reprogram my mind off the back of this mindset course to be more accommodative, to unlock prosperity and abundance for me and financial success, financial freedom, right? That it certainly acted as a trigger for me to have this crown chakra awakening event that I'm going to go into describing now. So this happened around August 2017, I think around the end of August 2017, where obviously off the back of all this new knowledge of me understanding the powers of the subconscious mind and quantum physics and all of this, right, how we can program our reality, I was listening to a Bob Proctor presentation where he basically explained that if you look at everything we see in the material world, and he was kind of pointing to his speaker stand, that if you zoomed in, the most fundamental basis of what this stand is is otherwise just atoms vibrating at a particular frequency in order to give off this appearance. So ultimately, everything is just energy, right? Vibrating at particular frequencies in order to give the illusion of form within the hologram. And so everything is energy. And I kind of went to bed, before going to bed that night, as I was just laying there trying to get to sleep, I was pondering this concept and tying it in with everything that I was kind of studying with the powers of our subconscious, the quantum physics, how, our consciousness as an observer can affect the wave form particle universe with the double slit experiment, and how powerful we actually are, and how fluid and interactive matter is, right, to our consciousness. And so before going to sleep in that kind of meditative state, just thinking about this in my mind, my mind's eye, I unlocked an experience which all of a sudden I had this activation about 6 inches to a foot above my head of this orb, right, which is like a yellow orb, like our sun, a miniature version of our sun, probably just slightly bigger than the size of a lacrosse ball, activate and just kind of fixate right above my head that I felt and saw in my mind's eye. And I've got an image there on the slideshow that's kind of like a good depiction and representation of what I was seeing in my mind's eye and what I was connected to, right? And so as this happened, I can actually feel the energy and the presence of this orb. And what developed was this channel that was then feeding vertically down, right down through my body, through the top of my head, connected to the orb. 2 channels. One was bringing in kind of like pure, clear, almost like white, but it was see-through, clear, purifying energy. And then what was coming up and being extracted was this kind of black miasmic energy that was then being purified by the orb and then pouring the purified version of it back down into my body. So this was like cycling for maybe about a minute whilst I was kind of feeling this amazing energy and this presence fixated about 6 inches to a foot above my head. Once that cycling finished, I remember being able to kind of grab the orb with my mind's eye energetically and slowly move it around my body and play with it. And as it was coming over the top of my body, as I was laying there, trying to go to sleep in that meditative state in my mind's eye, I could feel the push and pull of this orb as I was moving it over my body. And so I was kind of like with an S, like a snake, kind of meandering it down my body and just feeling this push and pull, which is quite incredible. And then I kind of stopped it above my pelvis. And then what I did after that was just basically fling the orb like a sun. It was a miniature version of my sun. That's what I felt it was. It was literally the sun in our solar system, but just a miniature version of it. I flung it about a foot below the middle of my ceiling in the room. And what started to happen was I started to then project planets out the top of my head from my crown around the sun at the center to form solar systems. Okay, so these different planets I was pumping out and flinging, and it was being caught by the orb of the sun, and they were all spinning around, right? And it was kind of like sped up, and all these different planets had different rates of orbits and spinning as well on their axes. And I kept doing that, so I created one solar system. Then other suns and stars started to come out with their accompanying planets, and then they started to form solar systems, and this was all spinning, just below the ceiling of my room. And then I kept pouring it out until I formed a whole galaxy. And then I formed multiple galaxies, and those multiple galaxies, as this was happening, I was kind of like zooming out in order to, fill in more of the space and become much larger in this model that I was creating and projecting in the ceiling, that I ended up creating like whole clusters of galaxies, right? That was just continuously pouring out the top of my head, out my crown chakra, where I ended up forming like this massive nebula kind of cloud with all the space dust and everything, with billions and billions of galaxies within it. And I got to the point where this kept just pouring out, and I just kept thinking, wow, this is amazing. Like it's expanding exponentially, and it's just pouring forth. But then I got this message that it was like, enough, too much too soon. As soon as that came through, everything just kind of shut down and disappeared, and I kind of came back to, in regards to being fully conscious and awake, right? Snapped out of that meditative state. And I kind of had goosebumps, and I remember kind of just sitting up and turning my lamp on. And when I turned my lamp on, I got like a little electric shock. And I was just kind of took 30 seconds thinking, wow, that was incredible. Like what just happened then? That was amazing. But then I kind of like turned the light back off and thought, right, let's go back to sleep and we can kind of assess this tomorrow morning. So the next morning, I jump on my computer and type in Google funny orb-like energy above my head, and I hit enter, and then pretty much all the top search results coming back were like crown chakra awakening, crown chakra awakening, crown chakra awakening, crown chakra awakening. So that was a very important initiation that happened, like I said, around end of August 2017, which seemed to also align with this great sign in heaven, as we'll go through in the next slides. That started to open the door for me to explore more of the occult and esoteric mystery schools regarding chakras, subtle body anatomy, because I actually had a tangible real life experience of these invisible energies that are often, written about for, since time immemorial, basically. That as soon as I knew about them, I kind of like briefly gone over seeing some posts about it, but wasn't really truly interested. But obviously now I was, because I had an actual experience of feeling this subtle energy above my head, and I was now very interested in exploring scientifically what was going on, which then opened the doors for me to explore the occult, the mystery schools, astrology, astrotheology, astrobiology, okay, and basically unlocked and brought me back online. And with what the mystery schools talk about is kind of being born again, right? Before that point, I was kind of semi-awake, given that where I've come from before, coming in with the codes that I was carrying, I knew this place just wasn't right. So I knew I could see, through certain levels of deceit, but there was still a huge veil over my consciousness in regards to the deeper levels of the occult that's working here on this planet with the evil forces. That this event was certainly a trigger and an initiation for me to kind of literally fully come back online and start that process of putting myself back together and remembering, right? Reawakening is just as much a remembering and working with my higher self to bring more of my consciousness down here in body. That certainly in the mystery schools, they talk about being born again, right? Which I kind of went through. And that's kind of why when I look back, I kind of see that as when I was truly born on this plane, spiritually speaking, because I was gifted new eyes, new ears, new senses, and heightened senses as well, ESP. And with everything that followed after that, as we'll go through in later chapters, was just incredible. A lot of trials and tribulations and triumphs right off the back of all that, which, looking back has been very rewarding, but very testing at times, but certainly gifted me with the knowledge to, safely navigate this realm and hopefully the next with, the tricks and traps. And like I said before, going back into evil, nothing, right? Knowing that there are forces that are working against us 24/7, but we're able to, once we get activated, take back control, take back our power in order to combat these folks and tell them to go basically cough from afar, as they say. So with Manly P. Hall, out of his book Secret Teachings of All Ages, he kind of mentions this birthing effect of being born again, right? Where he, to quote him from his book that you can see on the slide, in the mysteries it was customary to refer to initiates as phoenixes or men who had been born again, for just as physical birth gives man consciousness in the physical world, so the neophyte, after 9 degrees in the womb of the mysteries, was born into a consciousness of the spiritual world. This is the mystery of initiation to which Christ referred when he said, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. All right. And so, as we know with the parables and allegories in scripture, there can be multiple interpretations. They reckon there's up to about 7, but that's certainly one of them. Another lens is to look at God's kingdom to be pretty much anywhere you can incarnate and manifest or experience, which gives more credence towards the science of reincarnation. So in order to experience the kingdom of God, you've got to be born again into another body in order to experience this wonderful creation, right? Albeit this is a semi-fallen system that we're living in that is running some of the anti-Christic mathematics. But, what I started to develop was this awareness of symbolism. No thanks to studying astrology, astrotheology, and astrobiology, mainly through an individual called Santos Bonacci with his syncretism work and astrotheology presentations on YouTube, the Prisca Theologia, the Know Thyself, that I was just rinsing and repeating for about 2 years since that point in August 2017 up until like 2019, 2020. on repeat that really afforded me the knowledge in order to, in the body of information, in order to start safely navigating and dissecting and picking up on symbolism that I was seeing in movies, music, songs, advertising campaigns, news releases, you name it. So within the hologram around me, this kind of new language of symbolism revealed itself to me. No thanks to firstly understanding the signs and symbols and sciences of energies and characters and personifications that have come and gone all throughout history, that, if you connect the thread and look all the way back to its cause and its root, is embedded in the stars, right, with astrology and the ecliptic, 12 signs of the zodiac, the planets, and the north and south decans especially, which obviously then also connects into a fear kiss. So there was another interesting character too that I came across was Seven Bomar and his websites. And the emphasis there, again, for me, off the back of this, kind of, searching more about the occult and chakras. And, he was one of the first hits that I came across. The second hit was Santos Bonacci. Seven Bomar just re-emphasizing the importance of purifying the vessel. As we've alluded to already, these vessels are receptacles to our consciousness. Our DNA is scrambled. We are on a mutated planet. But the whole point of trying to get more of your higher self back in is to activate and consciously work with activating yourself. And you can only really do that once you become more aware as to the kind of chemicals, elements, and technologies being used to try and suppress our ability to switch back on and come back into remembrance. So that was really good in order to just re-emphasize the importance of, make sure, be conscious of everything that's going into your body, not only your water and your foods, but also, your environment, what are you exposed to with the man-made EMF that can be used, especially nowadays with like the 5G and stuff and all the satellites, that can suppress your ability to kind of tune in to yourself and connect to your higher self, can knock you out, when you go into those meditative states. And also, the music you listen to, the things you're watching, the friends you surround yourself with, just being really more conscious of that. And it's interesting because when you are born again, it's kind of that part of yourself that was kind of attached to the programming before kind of starts its process of withering away and dying. And so with that, there is like what's called an ego death, but it's more of a transmutation. So those aspects of yourself that were kind of like connected to the shadow programming of this matrix is transmuted and brought it back into the light with a higher awareness and a higher level of knowledge now, that to people who are still stuck down, it's almost as if that version of you has died for them. And to them, it's very scary because they're still stuck in the dark, that they almost become blinded by the light and this new being that's been created off the back of all this work that I had done, over the years, with coming into this knowledge, which embodied more frequency for me, that there was something wrong with me, right? And so I know everyone on this journey that goes into seeking the truth and having these kind of experiences, you've got to be so careful with mentioning this with the muggles, right? The NPCs, but they're just at that point where they've just not been activated, and they're running on fumes, basically, consciously speaking, given the mutations in the DNA and the 4 base nucleotide substrand that we have activated down here, which is linked to the Yod Hey Vav Hey black hole alpha omega wormhole matrix, right? Where we should be, sub 12 in regards to our ability to anchor that amount of consciousness with our higher dimensional identities in body. That certainly, like I said, going forwards, I was just gifted with amazing new eyes and ears and senses to start reading between the lines and picking up on all the symbolisms. No thanks to mainly the astrology, the study of astrology, right? And all the symbols that go in with the personifications and anthropomorphization of the fairy tales, especially in theology as well, and how that ecliptic runs through our body. That was able to even discern movies like The Matrix. I was rewatching many times. Lord of the Rings was just like, Sauron basically representing the forces of Saturn. That's connected into the moon and Apollyon as well. And these black hole 4 races going up against, the forces of light, which is kind of iconical of the sun, battling at Middle Earth. Earth is right between Saturn and the sun. And the Christos races and the anti-Christic races, and this kind of extreme polarity we're experiencing down here, that it was very revelationary for me. And it's quite interesting because it was all around the time of this great sign in heaven that happened in 23rd of September 2017, which literally kicked off the great revelation, the 7 years, okay, that we'll go into. But before we go into that, I just want to briefly show you guys some diagrams taken out of the MCEO teachings, okay, which you can see on the top left here. This is all part of the Keylontic science model that they go into, which we'll go into more depth in chapter 4, which is fascinating in regards to actually having a look at how our holographic time matrix is structured and how our DNA plugs into that, right, and the Merkaba fields and everything else with our energetic layers. But this, with where I felt this activation occurred, I was kind of relating it to a crown chakra, but technically, because it was above my head, the crown kind of sits right on top of your head there. It seemed to have been where the capstone is, which is linked to the 12th Stargate, Universal Stargate, right within the Cathara grid. If you remember that, recollect the Cathara grid with the Universal Stargates, that also listed the Galactic Stargates, which is the solar system level planetary Stargates, as well as on Earth Stargates, and then the Q sites that are linked to controlling the on Earth Universal Stargates, which is linked to inner Earth. That you can see in the diagram, the 10th chakra is located about 6 inches above the head, okay, under the Cathara center there at the top, number 12, capstone in 10th chakra, 6 inches above your head, which is where I believe this activation occurred, and that's what I came to experience. But as you can see with the different centers, there's many different centers on many different levels of our anatomy. This is obviously covering the external reality field of the light sound body, where there's many different structures. As we go into the later chapters, we'll see the step from, what we see in the physical to the first layer, the second layer, the third layer, the fourth layer, the fifth layer, and then going into internal, eternal plasmas of our anatomy according to the teachings, right? Which is very, very interesting to consider and see, because when you do get activations like this, you will come to experience certain things that I've experienced. It'll be very much the same. There'll be slight nuances based on individuals' kind of composition, template, activation, and DNA that they house and genetics that they house, but it'll certainly be very obvious that some of these centers might come back online with various symptoms that we'll also go into in later chapters. That could be anything from POPs, aches, pains, a revelational experience like I had with financial, being able to palpably feel the energy and see it within your mind's eye, to more subtle kind of little pops and releases of tension that might have been there for many years. You name it, there's all kinds of things that go on with the physiology that outpitches when we start to activate and switch on our DNA, which are connected into these energy centers too. Okay, so it is fascinating. You guys can pause this and have a read through the diagram in your own time, but in later chapters we will quickly go through some of the more detailed aspects of our subtle body anatomy, like a onion. There's many layers to it, but what you can see, the most important thing to kind of take away is that in conventional new age spirituality texts that we can get our hands on that are really perpetrated into the masses, they only talk about 7 chakras. We actually have 15. All right, that plugs us into the 15-dimensional 5-density holographic time matrix from which we pour our consciousness into to downstep to have experience. And so it makes sense that as above, so below, as within, so without, we take on the template of everything we pour consciousness through. So we actually do have 8 chakras that are outside of the body, 7 that are connected in the body, with, you can see how far it goes. It goes into deep space with chakra 15. Chakra 13 is linked into Earth's core. That's when we, it's important. The main reason why we're here is to help anchor energy into Earth's core, Earth's grids, okay, as kind of like acupuncture needles that come here from either the side of the crystal or the side of the anti-crystic black hole 4 races. And then obviously, you can see your chakra 14 is, quite high up, and then S12 up in deep space, which is your star crystal seals. So we have a huge connection energetically and invisibly that spans, light years, that we're all connected into. Okay, so it's everyone's the same, and so it's important to consider and be aware of this, and realizing how special we are, given that we're in a human body, and then what you see is only just scratching the surface, like the iceberg effect, right? Tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to us in our anatomy and our potential, as I've alluded to before, and it's all laying dormant within our DNA and these energy centers that obviously when you come back online, you might have an experience like I did, which certainly for me was like being born again. So as I said, this all happened around the time of this so-called great sign in heaven. okay, which is mentioned in Revelation chapter 12, which reads, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter." Now I comment, to decode this allegory in scripture, the woman relates to the constellation Virgo, who was clothed with the sun, as you can see there in the diagram, as the sun was in that sign on that date. The crown of 12 stars above her head being the 9 stars of Leo, with the 3 planets of Mars, Venus and Mercury. The moon at the feet of Virgo, with Jupiter exiting the womb of the Virgin after being in retrograde for 9 months, mimicking gestation, which was very timely indeed. I mean, that's so rare. With a lot of people that I was following when I came into this knowledge about a year later, looking back and tying it in with, oh my goodness, yeah, this happened around when I had my so-called capstone 10th chakra activation, right? That they did all these models to see when this alignment happened in the past. There was a few times, you know, a few thousand years back, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, but none of those times actually had Jupiter retrograding in the womb of Virgo for like 9-10 months, mimicking this so-called gestation that this allegory was for in the book of Revelation. So yeah, very salient. I continue, a very symbolic alignment and interpretation that cannot be ignored, especially as it was the genesis of many trials and tribulations and revelations I come to encounter in the years following my crown/capstone chakra awakening. And what was interesting with Manly P. Hall mentioning in that statement in the previous slide, how the neophyte goes through, 9 degrees of the mysteries and then is born again. This kind of ties in with the Jupiter retrograding for 9 months before then moved along the ecliptic and out of the so-called womb of Virgo as seen in the heavens, with the allegory of this all being related to astronomical alignments, astrological alignments. So another lens to interpret this in regards to the book of Revelations, marking the 7 years of the trials and tribulations, and then obviously we talk about the 7 trumpets and the 7 chakras. We got one interpretation, which is obviously as below in our biology, the 7 chakras, the 7 seals. Then we got to look at the earth itself, also has these energy centers, and it has the same anatomy as us, energetically speaking. And so it also applies on a planetary level. And at a planetary level, it's obviously a lot more macro, and you can deal with technologies that we've already alluded to with the grids, the Stargate structure, the Nibirian dyadic crystal grids, technologies, checkerboard matrices, and what I later came to find out with the MCEO teachings, these technologies that are linked with the so-called trumpets. So, the whole lesson for me when I started to wake up and what I was learning with what everyone who came before, these gurus and these teachers I was coming into, was to, and especially within myself, was just this urge to mine information, to then start just soaking in all the knowledge that I can get my hands on that I was guided to help me then to provide like a reservoir from which I can then, anything new I come into, I'll be able to scan it with multiple lenses of interpretation, right, in order to kind of deduct all of the possibilities and consider what might be being said about what may happen in the future, what is happening now, what has happened in the past, right? As I alluded to before, in the movies, there's plenty of symbolism in there. Motion scripture, right? That seems to be the kind of New Testament of this age, that they often soft disclose a lot of things that are happening in the past and that have happened and that's happening now, and obviously predictive programming, what's maybe going to happen in the future, as well as in the music. And like I said, everything else that affords you a really wonderful tool going forward to, analyze these texts and these stories and fables and myths with new eyes and multiple lenses of interpretation. Like Manly P. Hall and a lot of guys in the occult refer to, again, there's almost up to 7 different ways to interpret any given story. Okay, and as I found out early on, we've got astrology, we have astrotheology. We can see how it links to as above, so below, and how it links also into our biology. All right, And then I came across later this wonderful body of knowledge with the MCO AMCC teachings that offer me a kind of new age scientific ET interdimensional lens to interpret these stories too. Okay, that all connects, and all of them are probably true. That's the whole point. You don't just go into one dimensional aspect of interpreting the mysteries. There are multiple aspects to it, because creation, the way God source has set up creation, is multi-layered, it's multi-dimensional, it's multiversal, right? So you can't just stick with one interpretation of the Bible being literal. Okay, as you'll come to find that yes, there is actually a literal interpretation, but there's also an astrotheological interpretation. You also have, numerology in there to consider, geometry, right? You got it applying to our biology as well. Then you have it also applying to the kind of new age scientific ufology, ET, alien lens as well. Okay, so all of it is worth considering when trying to deconstruct the mysteries. That's kind of the point that I've worked out by now, but I was very early on kind of getting the message across, and that's why when you do come back online as you kind of connect to your higher self, your soul self, up in density 2 and above your oversoul, then avatar and rishi level identity, it's kind of like just consuming information, rapacious for seeking knowledge. Like, knowledge is food for the soul, and it's certainly true, and that was me even to this day. But the first 2 years, it was just rinse and repeating, a lot of Santos Bonacci's work with syncretism, and just getting that on board in order to afford me with the information to navigate and interpret all these stories, fables, myths, and scripture. That certainly, benefited me going forward. So here, as I found out later in the MCO AMCT teachings, the start of these 7 years of tribulation associated with the great sign also coincided with the biblical trumpets, which were apparently an Atlantean code word for the subspace sonic Mayan wave field projection technology by the fallen angelic Jehovian Anu Elohim and bipedal dolphin people of Anunnaki of Sirius A and Arcturus in the Phantom Matrix, as greatly detailed in Voyagers 2, Secrets of Amenti, that have been used as a remote range weapon system since the pre-Atlantean days, designed to help fulfill the One World Order Dominion agenda during this final end times drama stellar activation cycle that much of the doomsday prophecy was alluding to, and which has been used in the past to keep Earth populations in line, which explains the allegories surrounding the walls of Jericho tumbling down, the Tower of Babel, and the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. And as I had also found out with my research over the years, the God in the Bible, Torah, and Quran seem to all connect into these fallen Anu Elohim collectives known as Jehovah or Yahweh, playing God under a very arrogant and patriarchal philosophy. Even some Gnostics believed that the Jewish god Jehovah was the demiurgus linked to the Lord of the material universe and not the supreme deity. Now we go into later chapters decoding the Tower of Babel incident as well, which is really, really interesting, and otherwise proving how, the God in the Bible, Torah, and Quran is also linked to these fallen black hole intruder races, particularly the Jehovian Anunnaki, all right, and their long conquest and fight for the Templar in this time matrix with the fallen Seraphim races, which are, a lot of the reptilians and Omicron Draconians, the dragon moths, etc. Insectoids, right? That's where the Zeta and the Greys come from. So it's very interesting, very complex, like I said, multifaceted. But once you have all these lenses afforded to you, you can just don these different lenses, and then you're in a much better stead going forward when interpreting these myths in the scripture and the kind of allegories and parables behind them, which in this case, looking at an ET lens, you can certainly see how and why these trumpets can be linked to an energetic weapon that is very sophisticated, which, as we'll see later with the Tower of Babel and the walls of Jericho and stuff, they certainly used in the past to kind of keep Earth populations in check under a fearful God, right? It's always rule through fear, because fear is the currency of control. And she continues, as Yasha states, during Sachs stellar activation cycles, the natural 12-star crystal seals in Earth's Templar progressively and sequentially activate with Earth's stargates, allowing the axiotonal lines in Earth's grids to braid so Earth enters natural Merkaba under D12 planetary Maharic seal. The trans-dimensional star crystal seals exist between each of the 12-dimensional stargates in Earth's Templar. When star crystal seals open, they allow the specific dimensions of frequency from the stargate above and below to blend, The star crystal and seed crystal seals within the human DNA template and personal inner Templar operate the same way to create DNA strand braiding for atomic transmutation in Stargate Passage / Ascension. See, we're one and the same with the planet that we're on, and if the planet's having difficulties in activating its star crystal seals and its chakras and its stargates that connect into that, so are we. All right, and so if the planet cannot open its flows to the higher transharmonic universes and densities above it in order to ascend and allow those passages of souls to transmigrate, then yeah, there's going to be difficulties, and there certainly has been when we look at the history according to the MCEO teachings, where during stellar activation cycles in the past on this planet there have been wars and complications due to the fight over the dominion quest of the gates here from the fallen seraphim races as well as the fallen Jehovian Anunnaki, alongside the Christics, the Guardian races, right, the Guardian Alliance, the Emerald Covenant Christic races, trying to kind of like quell this conflict and just come in and heal and hold ground. That yeah, there has been like pole reversals, there have been red pulses from the sun, basically vaporizing anything on the surface. Obviously you knew about the pole flip. This happened I think back in the last stellar activation cycle that led to the Ice Age, right? And so all of this is due to the manipulations of the planetary solar system levels of these gate structures that are denying the flow of energy, and for these bodies, whether it's on a planetary level or small hominid level, biological level, to also connect in and open those flows without having any problems and shattering templates and stuff like this, which is what can happen if your DNA isn't activated enough and you've got these stellar wave infusions coming in. It can certainly cause damage. It'd be like taking a hammer to a crystal, and it would just shatter, unfortunately, because you won't be able to hold that energy. It's like a transistor, right? If you pump too much energy towards it and the transistor hasn't been upgraded, then it's gonna crash, right? So it's gonna break down. Something's gonna go wrong. But yeah, we'll go into that in more depth in chapter 4, which is fascinating. So symbolism, obviously, as I alluded to, became very important. This is what Manly P. Hall talks about symbolism out of The Secret Teaching of All Ages. To quote, "Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. In fact, it is the language not only of mysticism and philosophy, but of all nature. For every law and power active in universal procedure is manifested to the limited sense perceptions of man through the medium of symbol. Every form existing in the diversified sphere of being is symbolic of the divine activity by which it is produced. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts that which transcend the limitations of language. Rejecting man-conceived dialects as inadequate and unworthy to perpetuate divine ideas, the mysteries thus chose symbolism as a far more ingenious and ideal method of preserving their transcendental knowledge. In a single figure, a symbol may both reveal and conceal, for to the wise the subject of the symbol is obvious, while to the ignorant the figure remains inscrutable. Hence, he who seeks to unveil the secret doctrine of antiquity must search for that doctrine not upon the open pages of books which might fall into the hands of the unworthy, but in the place where it was originally concealed. Concealed, this wisdom must remain until this race has learned to read the universal language, symbolism. Lest these secret processes fall into uncultured hands and be perverted, the great arcanum was always concealed in symbol or allegory, and those who can today discover its lost keys may open with them a treasure house of philosophic, scientific, and religious truths. Amen." And so it's interesting that all throughout history, with this battle between the three main fallen angelic forces of the Anu Seraphim, the fallen Seraphim, and the Jehovian Anu Elohim, Anunnaki, and the Christic Guardian races, in order to preserve information down here, especially from the Christic side of things, back during the Christ period especially, Iasha quotes that, or says that, they had to often put things in different books, and then each book would lead them to the other book, which will ultimately lead them, if read correctly, to the main book that had the whole truth, in order to keep the information on planet, with the Illuminati Leviathan races of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Draconian mob, as well as the Anunnaki Protestant Anu Elohim mob, trying to get rid of all the records of the truth of our heritage, the technology, Stargate structure, what we're connected into, because they're obviously in the business of keeping everyone under Babylonian slave driving techniques, population control, in order to control the grids, right? They can't have an uprising of a load of human beings waking up, realizing who they are, what's been done to them, because overnight things will start changing pretty rapidly. So another thing that came into my awareness in order to assist me on my journey, this was obviously what I was guided to, were mushrooms and the power of mycelium and the intelligence of mycelium and the very healing attributes of psilocybin mushrooms, from which it sprouts from mycelium, which is a very intelligent organism. That this gentleman here, as you can see a photo of, is called Paul Stamets, who's a mycologist, that I was led to an interview with Joe Rogan, which basically for me dispelled all of the mysteries and the kind of fear that I had hearing all the horror stories of bad trips surrounding using this. And because now I was activated and I'd been consciously researching, astrology and the mysteries, astrotheology, you name it, I thought this would be a very good tool, actually, after listening to this wonderful gentleman, Paul Stamets, to assist me on my journey of helping me to connect to my higher self and help me to probe into the nature of reality and benefit from the neurogenesis that does occur as a result of ingesting and working with this most wonderful organism. Okay, so for me, that's what I was led towards. And there's a wonderful interview still on YouTube with Joe Rogan. If you type in Paul Stamets, Joe Rogan interview, he's on there, and it completely dispels all the fear surrounding this organism. And as long as you approach it with respect and with obviously what I was doing with a pure scientific motivation to help assist me in my awakening, then you will be gifted certainly with many insights, downloads, revelationary experiences. But yeah, it has to go with a warning that given where we are with the nature of the grids here, depending on where you get your mushrooms from, it can either be coded more to the antichristic black hole fall so-called mathematics as compared to Christic. So if you do your purifications, techniques, ceremonies, your intent, make sure you're very aware of who you are and how strong you are, and start off small, you should be okay. But as you'll come to find with me using this over the next 2 years, I probably had like anywhere between 12 to 15 trips over a 2-year period. So it's a very rapid increase in activations that I came into, and neurogenesis and intelligence and memory capacity, that once I got to a certain frequency, it's kind of like I expended my use for this substance in this lifetime for what level I needed to come up to, that I started to encounter some very, very testing energies and entities as a result of me kind of getting to that point of the threshold, I guess, of what they want to keep down here within the frequency fence of the bandwidth of consciousness of individuals, that they obviously wanted to try and knock me off grid and split my mind in two. And I go into all these stories later on in the other chapters. But goes without saying, even microdosing this stuff, very beneficial. So certainly assisted me as an initiate on this journey after waking up, that was led to within probably just 3 or 4 months, actually very early on, ever since my capstone chakra awakening. That greatly assisted me and was like shooting myself out of a cannon, to be honest, because it just activated more of my DNA, allowed more of my higher self to come in. That higher self and that new consciousness that was embedded into my body and braided was just hungry and guiding me for taking on all this knowledge that I can get my hands on through the internet. So we're going to finish off this chapter. Aleister Crowley Jr. and Azazel had this interesting character. You can see a photograph of him come into my life about probably 2 months after me waking up, which I'll read directly from my book. Otherwise, accompanied me on a lot of these mushroom trips that I was getting into as well. So I write, my first trip was accompanied by a peculiar character who had entered into my life as I started to awaken. I'll talk about the first trip in the next chapter, chapter 4 at Badbury Rings. This character I had recognized when going to the gym local to me for a few years prior, but never engaged in conversation until I changed gyms and saw him working there at the new gym. He had an awakening himself many years prior and was privy to the things I was starting to work out and connect in regards to alcohol, big pharma, spirits, social programming, the occult, and technologies to suppress the human potential, etc. I found him harmless, but looking back, he was deliberately put on my path to watch and later infiltrate, which seems to be a common theme when one goes through an awakening, as you all of a sudden become of interest by the dark forces who need to have assets close by in order to either help steer you off track, tag you, implant you, gather intelligence, or wipe you off the grids. And seldom few probably realize they are being used like little puppets on a string, which is why many who awaken confess of family members, especially, and even friends, all of a sudden coming out of the woodwork to make your lives difficult, stymie your spiritual progression, act as agents of the matrix to try and suppress your rise and question yourself, cast doubt on your new path, etc. I mean, I think for this instance, for this individual, he knew exactly what he was doing and getting up to. Something that I've definitely been exposed to and witnessed firsthand on my journey that can be very difficult to navigate, especially the ones who appear as angels in your life, but really are the definition of beauty is only skin deep when certain entities master the art of seduction in order to infiltrate. I mean, I'm not the only one. I'm pretty sure everyone listening here kind of understands that concept. The NPCs around us. Agent Smiths. This particular character venerated Aleister Crowley and loved delving into ceremonial magic, in which he shared quite candidly his experiences, rituals, and pacts he would make. His thinking was very twisted, and being a Libra, only accelerated the frenetic nature of our conversations at times, Libra being cardinal air, where Saturn exalts, linked to the deacon Lupus, the werewolf, which this sign can certainly take on the nature of. And he certainly reminded me at times, because he's quite a large lad, he's like 6'4", fairly strong, you know, like a Viking, but he kind of like seemed he took on this pattern of like this werewolf entity as well, this kind of like ravishing, bloodthirsty entity. He later got a Lucifer sigil tattooed on his back and was otherwise a very lost and confused individual who innately knew that he was connected to the Nephilim and pledged his body to be a vassal for Azazel. As you can see there on the left of the slide, that's basically what he sent me, written in his own blood, saying his oath is Nephilim and that he wants to pledge his vessel to Azazel to bring chaos onto earth, etc. He had the look of a viper spirit that was in him, and I always felt he could probably pass for Lucifer if he was ever in human form, that he certainly was an agent for. Regardless, in the early stages he was harmless, and we used to hang out, play football, take entheogens together, as there were not many other people around who were able to talk about the things we were talking about after having had somewhat of an awakening. I knew I couldn't go to people who hadn't had the experiences and awakening I had, as they are just not ready for the frequency of those types of conversations, which I completely understand, as I too was not ready until I had an awakening and would have thought someone was a bit crazy talking about the kind of things I was now into. It's the law of resonance, and you begin to accept this as you grow into your journey, that people will grow in their own time. All we can do is leave a lamp upon the lampstand so others may see the light if they are drawn to it, as Jesus mentioned in the Bible. He possessed the look of a man possessed, and interestingly, the Zeta Regalian, Zeta Reticuli, Zephelium, fallen seraphim from Lyra Vega, in Voyages 2 book, lists the association of this Phantom Matrix intruder race as having associations with Aleister Crowley through the Black Sun, Golden Dawn, Enochian watchtowers, metaphysical cults, and Azazel. How very interesting how this individual venerated Aleister Crowley and also pledged his soul to Azazel as Nephilim. And as you can see down here, there's a little image of what supposedly Aleister Crowley was channeling and working with, called Lamb. And this is what Lamb, or Crowley channeled from Lamb, quote, "They call us angels and demons today, but tomorrow they will call us something else." I was Lamb, the demon channeled by Crowley in 1904, a drawing of a demon Aleister Crowley channeled in April 8th, 9th and 10th, 1904, and the modern depiction of an alien, go figure, one and the same. And this is why it's so important during this age we synthesize the old occult mystery schools of demonology and these entities of spirit, and the new age occult science of ufology, and especially the immense body of information coming from the MCO, AMCC teachings, in order to bring the science and technologies back into spirituality, so it's not as reductionist and as woolly in our interpretations. And so when you see things like this confirm the connections to this Luciferian grey alien Zeta Reticuli race, okay, and these race lines that we'll go into more depth later under chapter 6, and these genealogies, it all connects in. It's like, it's just perfect how it fits all together. And so this metaphysical cult of Azazel and these races, right, connecting into these grey alien Zeta Reticuli, also shared allegiance with the Pleiadian, Nibirian, Samjays, Luciferian, Thoth, Enki, Zephelium allies. It is claimed in the book that all Zeta races emerged from the Zephelium, which are tall, bipedal, blue-skinned, insectoid, reptilian serpent seed race, in which Azazel was one strain. Beetle being a key symbol of this hybrid reptile race, which became a key element with an infiltration attempt by him in the astrals on me one time when using a scarab beetle. Okay, we'll get into that later. And as we will come to find, one of the black hole fall matrices is linked to the beetle people, which also implies a Nephilim connection from the fallen seraphim races that housed the race strain genetics of reptilians, insectoids, and avian forms. I had the luxury to observe his deterioration as he delved deeper and deeper into the abyss of degenerate black magic. On the flip side, through him, I was introduced to some of the mechanisms of the darker path, which was very educational and otherwise a good reference point to my moral standards and compass, having not the slightest interest in working with entities outside of myself, other than those aligned with the Christ and God, Source, Eternal / my higher selves. It was an interesting companionship that really encapsulated the saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Interestingly, as portrayed in demonology, folklore, the Bible, and Kabbalah, Azazel was reported to be a demon, evil spirit, or fallen angel. Not much is known or written about this entity apart from it being part of the fallen angels who fell from heaven, who can be summoned and contracted with in order for the summoner to acquire its services, where each demon has their own unique powers / gifts they can offer the summoner in exchange for something in return, normally their soul, which is their free will, over possibly lifetimes and or sacrifices, which is all proportionate to the summoner's request. It's interesting to compare the genealogy of Azazel with the MCEO AMCC teachings and the Jewish Christian stories with this dichotomy between the spirit worlds and the New Age, interstellar, interdimensional and extraterrestrial cosmogony, technology and history. One that expresses quite a difference in regards to who and what this entity is. The MCEO AMCC teachings labels Azazel a collective of entities associated with specific fallen angelic factions and genetic race strains, whereas the traditional views is that of a single entity who exists as an evil spirit that can manifest in form when summoned and is part of a hierarchy of demons as taught in the Kabbalah and other demonology textbooks. Such representations of these traditional demons are often portrayed in medieval paintings as being hybrid bipedal creatures spliced with many forms of different animal genetics. You can see a representation of that there with the demon showing the book to one of the popes back in the day, famous medieval painting. Although, as we saw with Aleister Crowley's history of channeling an entity called Azazel, it certainly matched the description of this entity and the associated race strain of the Zeta Cephalium they came out of from the MCO AMCC teachings. One such movie called Fallen, with actor Denzel Washington, as you can see the cover there on the slide, depicts very clearly the nature of evil spirits being able to work through any biological form to achieve their ends in the material world. This particular spirit that the actor Denzel becomes embroiled with when investigating a series of gruesome murders he finds out is Azazel, which the movie actually shows him pulling a book that is Manly P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages, within which he turns to a page that shows a famous medieval painting of a demonic creature gifting the Pope with a book. This creature is how the movie depicts the entity Azazel, something that doesn't really fit the genealogy of the MCEO AMCC teachings. And this is what I kind of did in my book, is because I had a few experiences where I've actually seen a demon similar to this, but when you connect it into the genealogy of like the dragon moth, the fallen draconians, they certainly can look like this, like bat, dragon type creatures. That certainly has the draconian vibe with that green demon down below. But then you've also got this entity race line called Azazel that's connected into the grey aliens that certainly then cross over into Aleister Crowley, the Luciferian, Sam J's Pleiadian genealogy, and the Tholthenki lines, which are very serpentine and sectoid based. And so, having to look through this lens again scientifically through my observations and experiences, I would suggest and confirm and conclude that the Azazel race strain is otherwise heavily linked with this Zeta Reticuli, Nephilim, Aleister Crowley, Golden Dawn, Luciferian, Sam J's Pleiadian entities, right, Tholthenki, etc. And this kind of cover up with the Judeo-Christian demonology with how Azazel's portrayed in this movie Fallen is otherwise maybe a diversion, in my opinion. Okay, but this is otherwise the kind of stuff that I was hashing out in my book to kind of try and bring the two worlds together and see what came out, seeking the truth from the facts, separating the wheat from the chaff, and synthesizing both of them. And thankfully through my first-hand experiences and observations, a lot of it was confirmed to me that it seems to be more of the side of the, MCO, AMCC teachings explanation of these entities that certainly Crowley was working with. This figure lamb certainly looks exactly the same as how these grey aliens, Zeta Reticuli, are depicted. How this entity that came into my life, this being, Aleister Crowley Jr., venerated Aleister Crowley, was part of the kind of Enochian Watchtower, dark occult practices that he venerated, had a Lucifer sigil tattooed on his back that is linked into the serpentine races and the insectoid races of the Nephilim, the beetle people, and then him actually using a scarab beetle later on, which you all know, Mani P. Hall, and a lot of the occult texts are linked back to ancient Egypt, which is, linked into the Anunnaki and the Aniseraphim family lines that are kind of tied into this Luciferian Cephalium genealogy. During an infiltration attempt, he used the scarab beetle. So it's like all these symbols match up, and they seem to be confirming the story and the tale of what Azazel is on the side of the New Age exopolitical interstellar explanation of what this entity is and what it's connected into, rather than the kind of the woolly and washy reductionist version of the spiritual text of the occult under the demonology and the hierarchy of demons, right, just fallen from heaven, governed by Lucifer, etc. So yeah, very interesting to kind of merge the two. As always, as I say in my book, it's just information at the end of the day. Do with it as you please. Do not take my word for it. Go and do your investigations, but I certainly offer my conclusions and insights given my observations and first-hand experiences too, that either can confirm or deny, or, like I said before, put things in the box of maybe and just wait until some point in the future until it can be, fully confirmed. Okay, so a lot of these subjects for me always sit on the fence, always say maybe until something new comes into my life. So I'm never dogmatic in regards to what I think I found out, and that I'm very fluid in that sense of being able to change my judgment and conclusions based on new information that I come into, okay, which I think is the best way to approach anything that is as obscure and convoluted and washed with so much deception as is with the occult, right? So yeah, very interesting nonetheless. For you folks on this journey of awakening, just keep an eye out for who does pop into your life. They might seem like guardians and guides, but just read between the lines, be very careful, and do not let them into your home if you suspect that they're obviously like this fella. Straight from the word off, it was very obvious what I was dealing with, but like I said, it's very interesting, educational for me. Do not let them in your house, because then they got an invitation to project in the astrals, and that's what inevitably led to him being able to get to me and infiltrate me. That kind of wasn't really, I let my guard down, wasn't aware of, and learned the hard way, basically. Okay, that we'll go over in later chapters, which is quite interesting. That happened around, I think, 2020 or 2021, yeah, which is quite interesting. So thanks for watching, guys, and listening. I'll see you over in the next chapter, chapter 4, where we will be going over my Babri rings first mushroom experience, where I saw the firmament type structure within the atmosphere, which otherwise linked to the hydrogen suspension fields, our DNA, how a holographic template is constructed given the cosmogeny of the AMC MCO teachings. Going to go into a little bit of ceremonial magic and the occult in order to provide again this context to compare what they're saying with the cosmogony, especially the Kabbalah, as compared to the very detailed scientific explanation of the 15-dimensional 5-density holographic time matrix and beyond. All right, so thanks for listening. Stay safe out there, and as always, stay sovereign, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.